Patrick Wiggins, Utah's NASA ambassador, but today we're talking electric cars and autonomous cars.
Yes, so not talking for NASA today, just talking for me and stuff that I love.
Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions
Happy
today.
to do it.
2018 has been declared the year of the electric car. What is going to make this year different from any other year?
For me, not much. I've been driving electric for 3 years now. But no, more and more electric cars are coming out. Of course, the Tesla Model 3 is probably the big one, but the Bolt, and of course there has been the Volt. Virtually every car manufacturer out there, if they don't have one in the pipeline, they've got one being designed, because it literally is the way of the future. So 2018, this is kind of like we're opening the door, and from what I'm hearing, 2020 or thereabouts, I mean, they're just going to be all over the place. The day of the ICE car, which I call them the internal combustion engine, are numbered. There will always be some reason to have some of them around, but eventually it's going to get kind of, unusual to have a fossil fuel vehicle.
What is it about electric vehicles that make them more attractive than ICE cars, internal combustion engine cars?
For me, environmental, for one. I mean, you're not polluting. You don't have stuff coming out the tailpipe as you're going down the way. And since they're powered by electricity, which in many cases, in my case, powered by solar, I mean, there's virtually none of that in there. People talk about electric cars being coal burners, but they don't seem to remember how much electricity is used in the generation of fossil fuels. So I'm just using a little, to be able to generate my car, but with ICE cars, there's considerably more. So for me at least, that's a big thing. And it's also fun. I mean, if you have never driven an electric car, go to a dealer that sells them and try one out. It's just incredible. I mean, the instant torque. I mean, you go from 0 to 60 in some ludicrous amount of time or whatever. And it's the handling. I'm not a car guy. As you know, I'm an airplane guy, right? But driving an electric car on the ground is about as close as I can get to flying an airplane in the air.
What is it going to take to get Americans, and Utahns in particular, to ditch their carbon fuel vehicles and go electric?
There's a couple of things. One is price. Of course, up to now, the total electrics, there've been the hybrids, but the total electric cars tend to be a little pricey. I mean, I have one, so I kind of know. That's coming down. The new Tesla, for example, what, $35,000, and then after that, they've got another one coming out that's going to be even less than that, and other manufacturers as well. But the other thing is what they call range anxiety. People are like, oh, am I going to be able to get to where I want to go, or am I going to be stranded without any, battery power left? But for most people, I mean, you leave your house because you plugged in at home. You leave your house, you've got a full tank every morning, and you can drive, well, depending on the car, 200-300 miles on a single charge. And how many people drive that in a single day? And if you do have to go longer distances, there are vehicles that can handle that as well. But that's basically it: cost and range anxiety. The cost is coming down, and also the range anxiety, as you get to know the cars better, is also going down.
One of the things that comes to mind, I remember, and I'm sure you remember too, when the entire Mountain West and a good portion of the western United States dropped off the electric grid. I mean, we went completely dark here in this part of the country. In 2003, the northeast quadrant of the country had a huge blackout. In situations like that, I mean, that happens from time to time. When that happens, what happens to the electric vehicles that depend on electricity to move?
I might add, by the way, a lot of that was caused by our Mr. Sun, right? So it can do things to mess up the electric grids. Right now, yeah, it would be a problem, except for people, well, I'm going to say, like me, that have solar, they can charge off of that. But, well, I'm getting to Elon Musk. I mean, he's got a whole bunch of stuff going on in Puerto Rico right now, trying to repair their electric grid using battery power. And people go, battery power? But yeah, there are literally cities, one in Hawaii, that's being run off of battery that's coming from solar. So yeah, we've got a very bad grid. It's an old-fashioned grid that was made for the early part of the last century. That's something that, and it isn't affecting cars. I mean, if the power goes out, you go to a gas station, they can't pump gasoline. because they don't have power. So a power outage isn't only going to affect electrics, it's going to affect a lot more as well.
So what is the answer to that? How do you overcome that challenge?
A modern grid. To where you're not as dependent on having one place generating the power that's covering a whole bunch of areas. What if every neighborhood had its own solar farm, had its own battery backup? Right now, you can get a battery backup that'll run your house for a couple of days, and most power outages don't last longer than that.
As we talk about electric cars, the other major thing going on is the autonomous vehicles. Let's talk autonomous vehicles. I was in Phoenix recently, and I noticed that there are these cars that have these spinning things.
LiDAR.
Right. Yeah, LiDAR.
Yeah, okay.
And found out that Uber is running an experiment there. They're also testing, Lyft is testing in San Francisco and in Boston and in Phoenix as well, I believe. The interesting thing is that there is a driver, but he doesn't really do anything. Right. How close are we really to having driverless vehicles?
How do you think I got here today?
Tell me about that.
Yeah, no vehicle that's on the road right now can there be legally without a driver. There has to be somebody sitting in the seat ready to grab the wheel if necessary. But you might be surprised how many cars out there from different manufacturers do have certain levels of autonomy. You get on the freeway, you turn on the autopilot in the case of Tesla, and it drives you where, you know, basically down the freeway. And I think they call that level 2 autonomy. Now level 5 will be able to go anywhere, any weather, without a steering wheel and without a brake pedal in the car. Basically, you get in, you tell it where you want to go, and it takes you there. We're not there yet. But the level 2, level 3 kind of autonomy, it's out there now and being tested.
You mentioned that your drive here, during your drive here today, you touched the steering wheel twice.
Maybe a couple of times, right?
2 or 3 times.
Yeah, and you need to do that. Now I'm talking Tesla now, because it wants to know that you're still conscious, if you will. Among Tesla drivers, it's called the nag, right? Yeah. And every few minutes, you'll get a nag, and it says politely, you know, hold on to the steering wheel. And so you wiggle it a little bit and to let it know that you're still alive and you're not having a medical problem. If you ignore that 2 times, it stops the car and turns on the 4-way flashers, right? No kidding. And alerts medical services. So it's not 100% autonomous, but it's getting there. And by the way, a question that I get, is that freaky? Yeah, the first couple days, it was like, am I really gonna, you know, and it was kind of like having my hands like this, just ready. And now it's just very comfortable, just driving down the road and, you know, watching the world go by. And it does have the advantage that now you don't have to stare just straight ahead all the time. You can be more aware of what's going on around you. So that in itself is helpful. And Elon Musk has actually had some statistics run that show that just with the level of autonomy now, there's already an improvement in crash rates, where people are either avoiding crashes altogether because the system detected them before the human could, or they lessened the severity of the crashes.
There is a matter of trust that you have mentioned before. There is a matter of trust when it comes to being in an autonomous vehicle. Intel right now is running a commercial featuring LeBron James getting into a driverless car, sitting in the back, and having it take him somewhere. What has to happen to get over that challenge of trust of autonomous vehicles?
It's kind of funny, but, and this, by the way, is on the web if you want to go and look it up. Look up the history of, what would you call them, self-operated elevators, right? If you look at the old movies on TV and things like that, and you'll see that in the old days, you went to an elevator and the door opened and there was an elevator operator in there, right? Right. And that person was trained to know how to run the elevator, right? Well, do they do that anymore? No. But if you look at the transition period, and there were newspaper articles and interviews, the whole thing, of people that refused to get on an elevator that ran itself. You had to have an operator in there for safety. And people literally refused to get on elevators that they were going to run themselves. And it took a while for people to get used to it. It took me a while to get used to letting my car drive itself. It's probably a couple of days. Now, I fly, so, you know, and anybody that flies, by the way, you had been flying in a vehicle that no human is running. They're watching what's going on, but the computer is running the things, basically. And it's the same with cars. It's going to take a little getting used to, but I've heard people say that kids born today, their kids probably will never need or get a driver's license because the car will simply go itself. Some of the extreme examples, of course, they're talking about, well, now, wait a minute. I've got my kids at school and I want them picked up to take into soccer practice or something, and I'm going to send a car to pick them up and drive them there. I could never do that, and yet give it a few years. And
you ride the elevator, don't you?
Yeah, you ride the elevator and you push that button yourself. So yeah, the elevator thing, though, it really was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how big until I looked into it.
Yeah, even though it goes up and down and up and down. That's all.
Basically
that's all, the only place it goes.
Well, people were afraid, for example, what if I'm stepping out and it starts to move and I get chopped in half?
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. So, which I guess could happen, but
yeah.
you know, well, I'm not going to worry about it.
What will the effect of autonomous cars have on safety, on air pollution, on congestion, on transportation costs?
There's some really great videos actually online for people that do automated driving, just to show people what's going on. And congestion, for example, you'll be able to have a lot more cars a lot closer together. Right? Because automated driving, you don't have somebody that's not paying attention, and you can almost, you know, draft someone, as you call it, you know, driving very, very close to somebody else. But because a lot of these automated cars will be kind of used by a pool of people, so you don't, you know, how often does your car just sit in the garage and it's never being used? Well, what if that car basically belonged to a bunch of people, and when somebody needed it, it came to you and took you where you wanted to go and then went to the next person? So literally, we will need fewer vehicles. So not only will we be able to put them closer together, we'll also have fewer of them to put closer together. So literally, it's like a ride share, but nobody driving it.
Wow. I hadn't even thought of that. The idea that, I mean, I drove my car to work today. Yeah. It's sitting in the parking lot.
It could be out making money for you right now. It could be driving around, picking up people, charging them, of course. There would be a fee for that. And then when you're getting ready to come back, then it comes back. Another video of with Elon Musk, actually. Now, he, of course, has some of the software that's not been released to the public yet. And it shows how his car knows what time to meet him. And so you see the car waking up and the garage door coming up, and the car pulls out, and then it pulls around and it pulls up to his front door and waits for him to come out, right? Now, of course, it says on there, not for use on public highways, because it does need to have a, but this is the kind of thing that now we go, ha, 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 but eventually people are going to, what, your car won't come to you? Yeah, I mean, gee,
I'm not Batman, you know.
You know, so, but again, it's the future. It is going to take a little getting used to, and I'm getting back again to the cost, which is coming down, and this whole idea of range anxiety, which is, for me, it's completely gone away. I mean, even when I first got the car, it was like, am I going to be able to get somewhere? But I've driven all over the place.
What are some of the infrastructure changes that have to take place in order for the electric cars and the autonomous cars to really catch on and become the majority of the vehicles on the road?
Part of it is going to be if you're going to go a long distance, which is further than what your battery can take you, you're going to need to have some way to charge one quickly. Now, the joke is that if you're at home, you plug in 15 seconds, the next morning you unplug 15 seconds, you tell people it takes 30 seconds to charge your car, right? Yeah. Well, really, it charged for 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. But if you're on the highway and you're trying to go to San Francisco or something, you're not going to want to stop every 4 hours and wait 4 hours to charge the car. That just won't work. And unfortunately, most of the cars on the planet today that are electric, that's what you're stuck with. Yeah. They're not long distance. Now, Tesla has come up with the supercharger, which is something that they've got thousands of them all around the country. And you pull up to those, and they're always next to a restaurant. You plug in, you walk into the restaurant, get a cup of tea, use the restroom, come back out, you're charged up and off you go. Yeah. So it still takes longer than a gas car, but it's still way, way quicker than charging at home. So it's that kind of an infrastructure we're going to need. We're going to need high-speed charging for all kinds of cars, not just Tesla, all kinds of cars.
And then how do you then control traffic patterns, and how do you control destinations and entering all of that? Will there be a big, huge master computer of some kind, or will each car be able to interact with other cars independently and autonomous?
Yeah. I mean, if you get far enough down the road, I can see cars talking to one another. Airplanes do that now. My airplane, right? Yeah. It's got a little box in there, and it tells me where other airplanes are, and it tells them where I am, that sort of thing. So I can see that coming with cars as well. It's not here yet, but with computers, you know, it's almost unimaginable what they won't be able to do down the road somewhere. But yeah, to have the car, I mean, right now, I get in and say, okay, here's where I want to go. I don't even have to push any button. Well, I push a button and say, navigate, channel 13. Mm-hmm. And it lays out the course, tells me how long it's going to take to get there. And they're always very accurate. It tells me what the traffic is. Do I need to go somewhere, a different route or whatever? And that's fairly simple stuff right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in a few years? You know, what are they going to be able to do then? It really excites me, and it literally does excite me. Well, just this morning, got up, little notice on my phone, your car has a new feature. They do that over the air, right? While it's sitting in the garage sleeping at night. You know, the mothership, as I like to call it in California, sends out this command, and suddenly I have new features on the car. And this is the kind of thing that all cars eventually are going to be able to do. If they don't, they're just going to go extinct.
Is privacy an issue for you? I mean, because if the cars and the mothership is communicating with your car constantly, and your car is communicating by satellite and GPS with other cars, I can see a situation where the government, well-meaning, is paying attention to the traffic patterns and thus knows where all the cars are and knows who's in those cars. All of a sudden, does privacy become an issue in that kind of an environment?
Darn, I forgot my tinfoil hat. You know, the whole idea of privacy, I think, is evolving. People, myself included, willing to give up maybe a bit. I don't mind if the mothership knows where my car is. Again, these great videos that you see where somebody's car was stolen and the people are looking on their phone and on the phone talking to the police saying, okay, it's on State Street, it's turning up 3rd, you know, so something like that would be pretty handy. Now, if you're a crook and you're trying to get away, well, maybe that's not going to be so good for you, right? Yeah. But yeah, privacy, different people have, I guess, different levels of comfort, but even in the Tesla, there are things like that you can turn off. I mean, if you're really paranoid about stuff like that. Yeah. But I leave it on because literally I'm constantly getting these little updates, and it's talking to the mothership, as are all the, 250,000 of these things out there. And they're all learning together. It's kind of like if you get back to Star Trek and the Borg, right? Mm-hmm. You've got the Borg and then all the little Borgettes, if you will. Well, all these cars are the Borgettes, and they're sending information back to the central base, and then it's sending out that same information to everybody else. So we're learning, it's machine learning as we go along. The cars are getting smarter.
Finally, what do you see as the barriers to developing more electric and autonomous vehicles?
Cost. I mean, literally, I mean, it's going to come down to that. When you look at, now I certainly did not get the top end of the Tesla line. As a matter of fact, I will admit, I got the cheapest possible one you could possibly get. And it was still a lot more than I ever paid
you
for.
were driving a Tesla.
Yeah, right. And you know, I got a Tesla. Although a lot of people go, what? They haven't heard of it. But it kind of deflates you when that happens. But it cost, as it comes down, as with anything else, I mean, as cost comes down, it's going to be more and more accepted. And I think that's basically it. The Model Y Tesla is on the horizon. I mean, they're talking $35,000 for the Model E that's coming. Or, no, I can't call it the Model E, sorry. The Ford highlighted that. The Model 3, it was going to be the E, the Model 3 at $35,000. And so this may be half that. So as the costs come down, I think that's going to do it. And again, the range anxiety. If people want to talk to me about range, yeah, I'll show them. Are you going to drive 300 miles in a day? Almost certainly. Most daily drivers are going to be perfectly happy with the Bolt or the Chevy or the Model 3 or whatever, these things that have got the 200 or 300 mile batteries in them.
Well, Patrick Wiggins, you've got your eye on the future. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions
Happy
today.
to do it.